The draft is quickly approaching, and most teams want to know who the hell is their team drafting. Now, for the Bucs, it seems fairly obvious that defense will be the biggest need that they want to address in the draft, and so most fans have responded, and most draft pundits have responded by basically drafting the best defensive player left on the board. The problem with that is a lot of times on these draft boards, the best defensive player available is like the fifth best edge rusher. And in my opinion, the guys that are falling to the Bucs, again in mock drafts, are not super impressive to me. Guys like Keldrick Falk, Cassius Howell, CJ Allen, I'm just not super impressed with them at pick 15. So that of course raises, the age-old question, is it better to draft for need or is it better to draft the best player available? And I've always been of the opinion, I think you try to get the best player available rather than reach for need. Because the draft has multiple rounds, I do think the Bucs would be better off waiting for a defender if the board doesn't fall that way. For example, if a guy like Sonny Styles or Ruben Bain doesn't fall to them, so they don't reach for, again, guys that I don't think are super impressive like Cassius Howell or Keldrick Falk or CJ Allen. Again, those are just a few examples because those are the most common picks that I've seen people choose for the Buccaneers. So then that obviously leaves the offensive side of the ball. And a lot of fans have been very upset with the notion of drafting an offensive player. But I truly think if that is the best value the Bucs can get, they should absolutely draft an offensive player. And specifically, I'm looking at a guy that has fallen in quite a number of mock drafts. Again, mock drafts are not the real thing, and they do not fully reflect what a GM is thinking, but I do think good mock draft simulators have some idea of how the board will fall. So if the board doesn't fall the way that the Bucs want it on defense, I think a guy they should absolutely be looking at is Olaivavenga Ioane. And that will be the first and last time I say that name, at least in this video. So forgive me, Venga, but I'm just gonna shorten your name so I reduce the possibility of getting it wrong. But if you aren't aware of who he is the left guard coming out of Penn State and is arguably the best true interior O-lineman in the draft. Now, I say true interior lineman because there's been some argument about whether or not a lot of the top tackles would actually fit better at guard. And maybe if some of those guys do move to guard, they would actually end up outperforming Venga. But he is the best true left guard, or guard in general, in this draft class. And I really don't think it's that close. If you've ever played Pokemon, just look at Blastos and tell me that that doesn't look like Venga. He is built with a solid base. Like, it is ridiculous. That is a man who cannot be moved easily, but he can move defenders fairly easily. There's a lot of very funny clips on YouTube and Twitter of defenders trying to get past Venga, and he just kind of shoves them away like the toddlers. It's very fun to watch, and that's, I think, indicative of good alignment tape when you just have fun watching the guy do whatever he wants. There's also other clips where Penn State just puts him on the move, and it's very funny seeing the defender realize they basically have no choice but to get run over by a runaway train. Now, Venga is not the prototypical Bucs alignment pick in terms of the fact that he doesn't have a red or ginger mullet, no teeth missing, nor does he look like he does a workout by lifting hay bales in Kansas. Regardless, I do not think that should deter Jason Licht, as this dude is definitely a glass eater. I assume if the Bucs were to draft him, he would go at left guard next to Tristan Wirfs. However, the nice thing with Venga, or one of the nice things I should say, is he can move all across the line. So he can play left guard, right guard, and he even has some experience at center. Now, that's important because Graham Biden did not do great last season, and while I think he is talented enough to overcome his somewhat mediocre play in his sophomore year, if he underperforms again, and this time he has a fully healthy guard next to him on either side, I think the Bucs will be looking to move on from him, either this draft or next draft. Wenger could, in theory, slot in at center, or if Graham Barton is injured, he could also slot in at center. As I just mentioned, the Bucs dealt with a ton of injuries along the interior of the O-line. They lost Mock early, and I don't ever want to see Mike Jordan on the field again or a player of his caliber. Wenger, though, should not just be in because, he's better than the backup options the Bucs had last year. He has a legitimate case, once being drafted, of moving in at left guard. I wanted the Bucs to honestly draft Ben Bredeson's replacement last year, but I think Wenger would be the perfect guy to replace Ben Bredeson and improve probably the only weak spot along the O-line. Mock is definitely like a work in progress. He still has his ups and downs, but I think Bredesen is probably the weakest link. He's still good, just compared to everyone else, he is probably the weaker player. But just listen to his stats from 2025 and tell me this is not a guy that could eventually be an all-pro on the Bucs. In 613 snaps, he allowed 0 sacks, 0 hits in 4 hurries, in pass protection at least. That is insane. Now, this does lead into one of his few downsides, which is that pass protection, little perfection. Like, there is very few better than him along the interior. But run blocking, he's a little bit weaker, admittedly. He's not the best at it. At the very least, his run blocking is not on par with his pass protection. Although, again, when the pass protection is so unbelievably good, it does make it seem a little bit more noticeable. Regardless, run blocking is something he needs to work on. However, I'm not super concerned about any of his weaknesses because I truly think almost all of them can be fixed with coaching. And regardless of how you feel about the Bucs offensive and defensive staff, the offensive line coach, Kevin Carberry, is pretty damn good at his job. And I think if given Wenger, he could get a very good player at left guard and mold him into like an elite guard at the NFL level. Just look at the tape. The dude can obviously play, regardless of his limitations as a run blocker right now, or, the occasional inconsistency to put his hands at the right level of a defender. He can play, very obviously. He has all the physical tools and all the mental tools. It's just a matter of working out some of his inconsistencies. And Kevin Carberry can easily do that. This is a very good guard, and the Bucs will be lucky to get them at pick 15. I would say the biggest competitor for Wenger's services is probably the Ravens. I guess the Giants could consider taking him at 5 or the Saints, but I think the Ravens are probably the biggest threat to drafting Wenger before the Bucs, which would really just hurt because going one pick before the Buccaneers would just be so painful for me to watch, especially if he turns out to be a really good player. But I do think there is a pretty good shot of him falling all the way to pick 15. Another guy on offense I think could potentially fall to 15 is Jordan Tyson. Now, normally a player of Tyson's ability would not be able to fall all the way to the Buccaneers, especially given he plays a premium position. However, I think the injury concerns may scare off a few teams, especially ones that want a player that is ready to go when the season starts. And Jordan Tyson, with his ankle injuries and his various other sort of ailments, I think may scare a few teams off, medically speaking. But he is incredible at getting open and has a lot of really good catches under his belt at the college level. Now, he does have some drops in between 2022 and 2024. He did have 12 drops, which is kind of a lot. But in general, he's very good at route running and catching the football. It's just a matter of if his medicals turn out okay. I think if you can promise that he can stay healthy, then most teams would be itching to get him. However, because of all the ailments, like I said, I think there is a decent shot he could fall to the Bucs at pick 15. And while I wouldn't exactly be super excited to replace Mike Evans or add a player to the roster to help replace Mike Evans' impact with a guy who also has knee and hamstring injuries, but regardless, Jordan Tyson, very good player. It's just some medical stuff that could scare teams off, and if the Bucs want to take that chance, I think they would land a very good wide receiver, and that is arguably something they do need. Denzel Boston is another option for the Bucs, although I see him more as a potential trade down candidate if the Bucs do find a willing partner. But Boston is built more like Mike Evans. He is 6'4" and weighs 212 pounds and is more of a true X receiver than Jordan Tyson is. With that said, Boston doesn't exactly have great speed and more often than not will be relying upon his strength to get the ball rather than, blaze past any cornerbacks. But if you do want to try to replace Mike Evans, which is incredibly difficult, I think the thing that Boston will be able to provide for the Bucs if he is the pick is a great red zone target. He has 20 touchdowns over 2 years. He is just very good at getting the football. And like I said, with his frame, he could make a lot of contested catches. And I think the Bucs will be looking for a guy that could do that and help force defenses, to play man coverage rather than just zone in on Chris Godwin and Emeka Egbuka. But let me know what you guys think. If you would still prefer the Bucs to go defense no matter what, or if you agree with me that they should be looking at guys like Vanga, Tyson, Boston, or anyone else that you can think of, let me know. I know I haven't been posting super frequently over the past few days, really months, but I have been really busy and it's just been hard for me to make time. I'm going to try to be better about this and, actually post videos and post articles. Obviously, with the draft coming up, I will be posting more content about that. But yeah, hopefully I get better at just making videos and making content because I do like doing this. It's a lot of fun. But with that said, until next time, see ya.